Today's story is one that sent shockwaves across South Korea. A tale of deception cloaked in the ordinary. A chilling double life that went unnoticed for years. Behind the mask of a dutiful father and neighbor was a man whose darkness rivaled the most disturbing legends whispered through alleyways and echoed in nightmares. Our journey begins in the quiet rural village of Shin-chae-mong, roughly 150 kilometers from the bustling city of Seoul. Life in this small farming community moved slowly, peacefully. But on March 1, 1970, something entered that tranquility. A presence that, years later, would become synonymous with horror. That was the day Kang Ho-sun was born. At first glance, Ho-sun's early life was unremarkable. He was the third child of 5 in a modest household built on traditional values and hard work. His parents hoped he would follow in their footsteps, tending to the land and contributing to the community's agricultural rhythm. His teachers spoke highly of him, noting his tidiness and willingness to engage with others. But beneath the surface, there were whispers, subtle, strange rumors that he would often disappear into the forest alone. There, he collected old knives, oddly shaped stones, and even the scattered remains of animals. It was an eerie habit that few noticed and none questioned deeply. To the outside world, he was just another local boy. Yet Ho-sun harbored a growing disdain for the monotonous labor that defined his family's way of life. Working the soil, caring for animals, it all felt like a suffocating burden. This dissatisfaction soon evolved into quiet resentment, and eventually, an emotional numbness that gripped him through adolescence. After finishing high school in 1989, Ho-sun avoided ambition. He drifted first into temporary farm work with relatives, and later into the military. Perhaps he believed discipline might forge a new path, a future beyond the fields. But his time in the army quickly unraveled. He resorted to petty theft and, on one humiliating occasion, was caught stealing a cow during leave. The military discharged him in disgrace, branding his personnel file with the mark of dishonesty. His service had lasted just over a year. From there, his life followed a pattern of instability. He bounced from job to job, truck driving, short stints in construction, small trades. Then came a moment of apparent hope. He met a woman, fell in love, and by the age of 22 was married with 2 young sons. Outwardly, it seemed like he had turned a corner. He often spoke about his wife and children with a tone of pride. Neighbors assumed the responsibilities of fatherhood had settled his restless nature. But behind closed doors, the truth was far more volatile. The marriage was steeped in conflict. The couple fought constantly, their voices carrying beyond the thin walls of their home. The strain of raising 2 children, compounded by financial stress and emotional distance, tore at what little harmony they had. When their second son was born, whatever patience remained inside Ho-sun evaporated. In 1998, he left it all behind. The marriage dissolved and he walked away. Not just from his wife, but from the village itself. He took his children and moved north, seeking a fresh start in a quieter, more modern town. He imagined this new place might offer the life he had always fantasized about. A life with order, success, and control. Now burdened with the sole responsibility of supporting his sons, Ho-sun tried to rebuild. He relocated again, just slightly further north, and purchased a small parcel of land. There, he began raising livestock, pigs, cows, chickens, and even kept bees. From the outside, he seemed like a man reinvented, a self-sufficient farmer supplying his home with meat and honey. But there was something unusual about his property, something that made the villagers uneasy. Ho-sun had an unusual fondness for stray dogs. He welcomed them onto his land regularly, and passers-by believed he was simply a compassionate man offering shelter to unwanted animals. The truth was far more sinister. These animals weren't pets. They weren't companions. He didn't take them in out of pity. His reasons were darker, unthinkable. And this was only the beginning. The line between man and monster had long since dissolved in Kang Ho-sun's mind. His descent into depravity was neither sudden nor accidental. It was calculated, deliberate, and increasingly grotesque. What began as crude experiments on farm animals morphed into something far more sinister. Under the pretense of compassion, he roamed the streets gathering stray dogs, only to unleash upon them a torrent of cruelty. He strangled them without remorse. He beat them to death as if exorcising some unseen rage, then carried on with his day like a man simply tending to chores. This sadistic ritual was no anomaly. History has shown that many of the world's most notorious serial killers began with animals. For Ho Sun, it was a rehearsal, a twisted education in domination and death. And while the shadows of his farm concealed these horrors, his outward life continued under the guise of normalcy. Despite his private abyss, Ho Sun persisted in trying to build a semblance of personal stability. Yet again, he married. His third union was no different, shattered by violence, arguments, and eventual divorce. With each failed relationship, his hatred festered. His contempt for women grew deeper and more venomous. In his eyes, they were the cause of his suffering, the source of his bitterness. He saw betrayal in every glance and rejection in every silence. Still, he tried again. He married a fourth time. Her name was Hygiene, a woman who owned a massage parlor and, for a while, appeared to bring calm to his storm. This marriage was different. They worked side by side. She taught him massage techniques, and he clung to the idea that, together, their combined income could finally offer a sustainable life. To outsiders, they looked like a stable, even thriving couple. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Before we return to this grim narrative, consider this chilling reflection. What happens when you are confined with someone who was once your entire world, but is now your greatest threat? How does the slow erosion of trust twist love into paranoia? How does guilt change a person's gaze? Their voice? Their silence? These questions belong to a genre steeped in psychological torment, the hermetic thriller. It is born where there are no witnesses, no escape, no safety. Picture it. A sparse apartment in the heart of Tokyo. All furnishings gone. Tatami mats cover the floor. In the center, a suitcase replaces the table. Hiro and Aki sit face to face. They were once lovers, soulmates even, sharing dreams and memories under this very roof. But now, it's their final night in this place, and what remains is a silent duel of memory, regret, and accusation. There is no gun, no blade, only suspicion, and a lingering secret neither dares to fully confess. In that stifling space, a single truth remains buried. One of them is responsible for murder. Each sees guilt in the other's eyes. Every breath tightens the noose around their shared past. This is not a story of sirens and crime scenes. It is something far more intimate and far more terrifying. A psychological standoff that echoes the works of Minato Kana, Japan's undisputed queen of the thriller. A masterpiece that peels back the skin of the human soul, exposing fear, deceit, and the ever-thinning veil between victim and perpetrator. But for Kang Ho-sun, reality was about to overtake fiction. On October 30th, 2005, the illusion of control he had so carefully maintained collapsed in flames. That morning, his wife Hygiene had planned to visit her mother. It was an ordinary day. They walked through the neighborhood, shared coffee, and talked about the mundane details of daily life. Hours later, as they sat inside the house, a strange and powerful smell began to fill the air. Smoke crept in, silent at first, then overwhelming. Within minutes, the fire had consumed the house. And the most devastating part? The fire's origin was traced to the very room where Hygiene and her mother sat. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, but it was already too late. The blaze had moved too quickly. The women had no time to escape. Their bodies were discovered charred, lifeless, trapped in a hell of smoke and fire. News of the inferno spread fast, and soon Ho-sun was on his way, alerted by panicked relatives. But when he arrived, something felt off. His demeanor, vacant, emotionless, eerily detached, sent ripples of unease through those gathered. Some said it was shock. Others saw something colder, something far more calculated. The mask of the grieving husband didn't quite fit. And as the ashes cooled, suspicion began to rise. Some believed Kang Ho-sun's cold demeanor in the aftermath of the fire was a natural response to severe psychological shock. Others weren't so certain. Hygien's family, devastated by her sudden and violent death, demanded answers. They wanted the full weight of the law to investigate every angle of the tragedy. But what they got instead was a conclusion that felt hollow and incomplete. The official inquiry deemed it an accident, an unfortunate blaze, most likely sparked by faulty wiring or some other mundane domestic malfunction. No accelerants, no signs of foul play, no evidence pointing to an intentional act. And so the file was closed. To those closest to the case, however, doubts lingered. For Ho Sun, at least on the surface, it was a profound loss. In the days and weeks following the fire, he withdrew. He appeared pale, constantly fatigued, and easily agitated by the smallest inconveniences. Acquaintances noticed he lashed out over trivial things. Neighbors, who once greeted him casually, said he had grown distant, barely stepping outside. To them, it was the visible decay of a man crushed by grief. But something far more sinister was stirring beneath the quiet. Tired of experimenting on animals, Ho Sun crossed a line few ever dare to approach. The predator in him had awoken fully, and it now craved human prey. His first victim was a woman on her way to work, a local government employee, walking alone during the early morning hours. He offered her a ride, masking his true intentions behind a familiar charm and an unthreatening smile. She accepted, unaware she had just stepped into a death trap. Moments later, she realized something was wrong. The car was veering away from her usual route. Alarmed, she reached for her phone, but he was faster. He wrenched it from her hands, his mask slipping. Then he drove her to a secluded area, where he unleashed his violence with terrifying precision. He beat her savagely, then strangled her using her own stockings. When it was over, he mutilated her body, cutting off her fingertips to prevent identification, and buried her near his property. Then, as if nothing had occurred, Ho Sun resumed his daily routine. He cared for his animals, worked shifts at the massage parlor, and monitored the news closely, waiting to hear if the police were onto him. But there was silence. No leads. No witnesses. The woman had vanished into the void, and Ho Sun had gotten away with it. That success gave him confidence. And before long, it gave him hunger. On December 14, 2006, driven by the urge to relive the thrill, Ho Sun set out again, this time heading to a city just south of Seoul. He chose his terrain carefully. Dimly lit streets near bars and karaoke lounges, places where young hostesses finished late and often accepted rides from customers. There, he found a 45-year-old woman, shared a drink with her, made her laugh. She got into his car, likely expecting nothing more than flirtation or companionship for the evening. But the destination was the same: a lonely, dark road, suffocation, disposal, and then the ritual repeated itself. 10 days later, he struck again. Another hostess, another ride, another lie, another body. By now, the act was more than just murder, it was a performance he had perfected. He targeted women with chilling consistency. He played on their trust, exploited their hope for connection, then ended their lives with cold efficiency. In early January 2007, he escalated again. Within just 4 days, 3 more women were gone. A 52-year-old office worker, a 37-year-old hostess, a 21-year-old student. The diversity of their backgrounds suggested a horrifying truth. Ho Sun didn't care who they were, what they did, or how they lived. The only thing that mattered was that they believed him. By January 8, 2007, the list of his victims had grown to 7. 7 women, 7 lives extinguished. The pattern was finally becoming impossible to ignore. The authorities raised the alarm. The city was gripped by fear. Women were vanishing with no explanation, no witnesses, no trace. And then he vanished too. Just as suddenly as the killings began, they stopped. Ho Sun faded into the background, blending once more into society like a shadow hiding in plain sight. But the darkness hadn't left him. It was only waiting. For a time, Kang Ho Sun retreated from his killing spree. He shifted his focus temporarily to financial matters. What surfaced next was chilling. Just days before the fire that consumed his home and claimed the lives of his wife Hai-Jin and her mother, Hai-Jin had taken out a significant life insurance policy. The timing was no coincidence. It was precise, calculated. Despite the glaring suspicion surrounding the policy's activation and the sudden fire that followed, the insurance company processed the claim. Ho-sun received a staggering 600 million won, around $500,000 at the time. With this windfall, he no longer needed to hustle for work or maintain the appearance of normalcy through petty jobs. He could afford to disappear from sight, lie low, and wait. He watched silently, monitoring whether law enforcement would connect the dots between the string of missing women and the man living quietly on a farm. For nearly 2 years, he stayed dormant. The killing stopped, but the monster within him never truly slept. Then, in November of 2008, the silence was broken. Something inside Ho-sun snapped once more. On November 9th, he resurfaced. His target was a 48-year-old housewife. Her fate was no different than the others. Just over a month later, on December 19th, he struck again, this time a 19-year-old university student named Yoon Chae-in. But this final act would prove to be his undoing. Chae-in's disappearance sent her family into a panic. She was diligent, punctual, and never strayed from her routine. When she failed to return home, her loved ones contacted the authorities immediately. They knew she took the same bus route to university every day, and now she was simply gone. Fortunately, fate had turned. Just months before her disappearance, surveillance cameras had been installed near her regular bus stop. The footage was clear and damning. There she was, stepping into a car that didn't belong to anyone she knew. The vehicle's make and model were soon identified. Then came the next mistake. Ho-sun attempted to withdraw money from Chae-in's bank account using her ATM card. His face, caught in the cold, unflinching eye of the ATM camera, was broadcast nationwide. It didn't take long. On January 27, 2009, authorities descended on his farm and placed him under arrest. But the true horror was only beginning to unfold. The search of his property unearthed a series of grotesque discoveries. 2 vehicles, both charred beyond recognition, one of which matched the car seen in the footage linked to Yoon Chae-in. A pile of women's underwear, some blood-stained, clothing soaked in dried blood. But most damning of all, DNA tests confirmed that not all of the samples belonged to Chae-in. The conclusion was inescapable. There were other victims. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Kang Ho-sun confessed. He admitted to killing all 8 women between 2006 and 2008. He led investigators to their burial sites. He described in chilling detail how he lured them, how he ended them, and how he disposed of their bodies. At first, he denied any connection to the deadly fire that took his wife and mother-in-law. But the case was reopened. And this time, investigators pursued every lead, dissected every detail. The conclusion they reached was stark. The fire had not been an accident. It had been a meticulously staged arson. Motive, insurance. Method, fire. Victims, 2 innocent women. Now all eyes were on him. The South Korean media exploded with coverage. His name dominated headlines. Citizens were horrified. Ho-sun became the face of evil. Yet in the midst of this storm, a controversy brewed. Human rights groups called for his identity to be shielded, citing laws protecting the privacy of defendants to safeguard their families from stigma. But this case was different. The country had never seen anything quite like it. The public outcry was immense. Photos of Ho-sun flooded television screens and newspapers. His crimes fueled national debate over the balance between legal confidentiality and public safety. Eventually, his story played a direct role in the revision of South Korean policies regarding the disclosure of criminal data. When he finally stood trial, the court saw through his final attempt to escape accountability. While he admitted to the serial murders, he continued to protest his innocence in the deaths of Hyejin and her mother. But the evidence was damning. The judge reviewed every shred of proof, every testimony, and every documented atrocity committed by Ho-sun. There would be no leniency. He was found guilty on all 10 counts: multiple murders, arson, and the calculated killing of his wife and mother-in-law. On April 22, 2009, the verdict was delivered: death. But the sentence carried a bitter irony. South Korea had enacted a moratorium on the death penalty. And while Ho-sun had been condemned to die, the machinery of execution had long since gone silent. Since 1997, South Korea has maintained a moratorium on the death penalty. Courts may continue to sentence individuals to death, but those sentences are never fulfilled. Execution chambers remain unused. The condemned sit in silence, awaiting a punishment that, in all likelihood, will never come. Kang Ho-sun is one of them. Officially, he awaits execution. In practice, he serves a life sentence, confined behind prison walls, his days stripped of freedom but not of breath. For the families of his victims, this reality offers little solace. No amount of time or punishment will bring back what was taken from them. Their daughters, mothers, sisters are gone. And yet, there is one certainty they can cling to: Ho-sun will never walk free again. He will never haunt the streets, never lure another innocent soul into his grasp. Society has locked him away permanently, but while justice may have found him, the shadow he cast continues to stretch. His children, 2 sons, have vanished from public view. According to scarce reports, both boys chose to sever ties with their past. They changed their surnames and disappeared into anonymity, avoiding attention, avoiding questions, avoiding a legacy drenched in horror. Their current whereabouts remain unknown, but one truth is undeniable. Growing up under the roof of a man like Kang Ho-sun leaves more than a name to bury. It leaves wounds, deep, invisible scars that no verdict, no sentence, and no passage of time can ever fully heal.